All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. The Nutrient Necropolis, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Flat Tire Gambit, exposing the Nutrient Necropolis, the androgynous abomination, and the Marxist plot to farm men. Walk through the modern city and you will see the walking dead, men hollowed out by a parasitic system I call the Nutrient Necropolis. This is the stark reality of your world. You are viewed not as a sovereign individual with a soul, but as a biological resource to be farmed, drained, and discarded by a gynocentric order that demands your labor while offering nothing but contempt in return. You have been betrayed by a culture that sold you the script of the gentleman, only to watch you be exploited by the very people you were taught to protect. You know the scene, the damsel feigning a flat tire on the side of the road, not because she is helpless, but because she is running a shit test to see if she can trap you in a state of servitude. It is the flat tire gambit, a calculated deception where she pretends helplessness to snare your utility. And if you fall for it, you are not a hero, you are a victim of your own gullibility. Breaking your knuckles for a woman who will later ghost you to chase a man who wouldn't lift a finger to save her. We are going to strip away the comforting delusions right now and look at the raw data with the scalpel of logic. We will expose the shit test for what it is, a manufactured crisis designed to measure your capacity for exploitation, not your character. We will dismantle the absurdity of the post-genderist dream, that gray, sexless blob of androgyny, and prove with the cold, hard facts of evolutionary biology that nature thrives on tension and polarity, not a Marxist monoculture of the soul. You will learn that trying to reason with a woman's emotional volatility is a category error, a futile attempt to teach algebra to a dolphin, and that the only winning move is to master the stoic art of the gray rock. This is about reclaiming your frame, walking with the stride of a sovereign, and realizing that your body is the final argument for the beautiful in a world dedicated to the ugly. We are going to deprogram your blue pill delusions and resurrect the living spirit of Western civilization by understanding one simple truth. The system is the vampire, and you are the meal, unless you choose to walk away. The parasitic theater of the shit test. Look closely at the medieval code of courtly love, and you do not see romance, but a brilliant psychological operation designed to neuter the warrior class. The troubadours of the 12th century, sponsored by the high courts, didn't invent love. They invented servitude to keep violent knights busy jousting for favor instead of rebelling against the crown. Fast forward 8 centuries and we see the same psychological shackles applied through the glowing screens of your pocket. The digitization of this dynamic has turned the modern male into a swipe-right serf, tilling the barren soil of dating apps for a chance to be seen by a solipsistic princess who views him not as a partner, but as a digital NPC in her transactional hellscape. The constant shrieking about the need for protection is a calculated falsehood, a veil of tears used to obscure the reality of female mating strategy. If safety were the genuine priority, the data would show women flocking to the safest men, the accountants, the engineers, the guys who stay home on Friday nights, but instead, we see them gravitating toward the very danger they claim to fear, seeking the perception of protection from high status. high-risk males while ignoring the structural safety provided by the working-class men who built the civilization they inhabit. This is the logical refutation of the safety narrative. It is a demand for status, not security. A hypocritical bargaining chip played to extract resources from men who are actually dangerous to no one but the wallets of their future ex-wives. Consider the thoughtful offer trap, a classic catch-22 that exposes the transactional nature of the dating market. When the check arrives and she waits to see if you reach for your wallet, she is conducting a calibration of your gullibility, not a measure of your generosity. If you pay, you signal that you are a compliant beta provider ripe for exploitation. If you hesitate, you are labeled cheap and lacking in the chivalry she only pretends to care about to maintain the frame. This is the syllogism of the fake test in action, a no-win scenario designed to separate a fool from his resources under the guise of manners, a logical trap where the premise itself is a lie. I recall a perfect case study in this absurdity involving a man who stopped to help a woman with a flat tire on a busy highway. She feigned the helplessness of a damsel in distress, a performance worthy of an Oscar, standing by with her manicured hands on her hips while this poor soul ruined his shirt and broke his knuckles loosening the rusted lug nuts. Once the spare was on and he was sweating in the sun, expecting a number or a drink, she simply got in her car and drove away. Likely to meet a man who wouldn't have known a lug nut from a cashew, but possessed the frame she actually desired. She didn't need a mechanic. She needed to confirm she could command a man to destroy himself for her comfort, and she discarded him like a used tissue the moment the utility was extracted. This defines the core of the modern dating landscape, a barren wasteland I name the Nutrient Necropolis, where men are seen not as souls to be cherished, but as biological resources to be farmed and discarded. In this gynocentric order, the life force of masculinity is sucked dry to fuel a lifestyle of consumption and complaint, offering no reciprocity, no loyalty, and undeniably no love. We are witnessing the birth of a civilization where the male is merely a utility to be drained, a biological battery powering a machine that hates him, leaving him hollowed out by the very system he was told to serve. To survive this, a man must weaponize his rhetoric and learn to identify the frame before he steps into the trap. You must reject the premise of the test entirely. When a woman throws a manipulative curveball to see if you will duck, you do not swing, nor do you duck, you walk away from the ballpark. By refusing to play a game where the rules are rigged to extract your resources without guarantee of loyalty, you reclaim your sovereignty and deny the parasite its host. Ultimately, a relationship founded on shit tests is inherently antitrust and therefore parasitic, a union destined for the pathology of the family courts. Let us apply the logic of the ancients to this modern rot. Trust is the absolute foundation of a functional relationship. Shit tests are calculated deceptions designed to manipulate male behavior through stress and dishonesty. Therefore, a relationship built on such a foundation is inherently dysfunctional and parasitic, for you cannot build a castle on a foundation of quicksand and expect it to stand against the storms of life. We have exposed the Nutrient Necropolis as a systemic engine of extraction, a digital arena where men are fed to the lions of gynocentric deceit, through double binds like the thoughtful offer and the flat tire gambit. Yet, the most profound danger lies not in these overt traps, but in the silent, suffocating gaslighting of the domestic sphere. When the man attempts to bring the sacred order of the trivium, logic, grammar, and rhetoric into the home, he mistakenly believes he is entering a partnership of equals. He is tragically mistaken. He is instead stepping into a biological vortex where his reason is not a tool for connection, but a trigger for contempt, the abyss of female affect and the futility of empathy. I recall a specific gut-wrenching instance involving a man named Mark, a software engineer whose life was governed by the orderly laws of code and logic. He sat across from his girlfriend, a creature of pure, unadulterated volatility, who was screaming because he had purchased the wrong brand of organic almond milk. Mark, operating under the delusion that he was dealing with a rational agent, attempted to deploy de-escalation techniques. He lowered his voice, maintained eye contact, and used a soothing tone to explain that the nutritional profile was identical. He tried to fix the problem, This was his fatal error. In the theater of female affect, the problem is not the issue. The issue is the display of emotion itself. By trying to apply logic to a chemical spill, Mark wasn't helping. He was attempting to silence her experience, which her psychology interpreted as a negation of her existence. The more he tried to calm the storm, the higher the waves rose, a perfect demonstration of the calm down paradox. To a woman ruled by the whims of her immediate biology, your attempt to stabilize the environment is an act of aggression against her emotional autonomy. This is not a bug in the system, but a feature of the hardware you are trying to interface with. The sheer absurdity of the feminist claim that men are emotional too is a linguistic trap, a sleight of hand designed to feminize the male psyche and drag us down into the pit of sentimental incompetence. Let us dismantle this lie with the cold steel of a syllogism. Premise 1. Men possess emotions, but they are the masters of them, capable of compartmentalization and transcending immediate impulses through the faculty of reason. Premise 2. Women do not merely possess emotions, they are their emotions. They have no existence distinct from the fluctuating storms of serotonin and dopamine that dictate their every whim. Conclusion. To equate male stoicism with female hysteria is a category error of the highest order. When a leftist tells you that anger or sadness makes you just like her, they are lying. Your anger is a controlled fuel. Her sadness is a flood that destroys the village. You are the architect observing the weather. She is the weather itself, destroying everything in its path. We must confront the biological reality that what modern psychology pathologizes as men's difficulty addressing women's emotional instability is actually a catastrophic mismatch of operating systems. You are trying to run Windows on a toaster. Men operate on logic, hierarchy, and problem solving, the very essence of the trivium and the foundation of Western civilization's greatest achievements. We build bridges and cure diseases because we suppress the noise to focus on the signal. The female evolutionary niche, however, is rooted in volatility. For hundreds of thousands of years, her survival depended on manipulating the social hierarchy and extracting resources from the tribe through displays of distress and hysteria. Chaos was her weapon. Instability was her leverage. When you sit there bewildered by her irrational outburst, you are not failing at communication. You are witnessing a biological predator attempt to hack your nervous system. This dynamic functions as an emotional vampire mechanism, a stress test designed to probe the structural integrity of your masculine frame. She throws a tantrum over a dirty dish, a biological weaponized emotional outburst to see if your cortisol spikes. If you break, if you yell back or crumble into an apology, you are deemed genetically weak, unfit to protect the resources, and she loses respect for you. If you stay and absorb it, trying to empathize with her madness, you become an emotional tampon, a utility for her to discharge her psychic waste onto. There is no winning in the quagmire of her feelings. The healthy man recognizes this maneuver for what it is, a trap. She is not asking for a solution. She is demanding your submission. This leads us to the only viable strategy for survival in the Nutrient Necropolis. The remedy of the stone. You must master the art of gray rocking. You must become as uninteresting and unreactive as a rock in a garden. Starve the emotional vampire of her nutrients. When she launches into a tirade about something that happened 3 years ago, do not engage, do not defend, do not explain. Look at her with the bored eyes of a man watching paint dry. Offer no emotional sustenance. Let her rage bounce off the impenetrable armor of your indifference. By refusing to feed the beast, you deny it the power it seeks over you. We can look to the spirit of Schopenhauer to understand why this is necessary. The female mind is fundamentally trapped in a solipsistic prison, able to perceive only the immediate physiological experience of the self. She cannot step outside her own perspective to understand an objective reality that does not cater to her feelings. Trying to reason with a woman in the throes of an emotional state is a category error, a profound mistake of projection. You are assuming she possesses the same capacity for abstract reasoning that you do. She does not. It is like trying to teach algebra to a dolphin. The dolphin is intelligent in its own context, but it cannot comprehend the abstract laws of mathematics, and you will look like a fool for trying. You cannot argue a dolphin into understanding calculus, and you cannot argue a woman into sanity. Therefore, you must weaponize the trivium against this chaos. First, apply grammar. Define the terms of the engagement immediately and refuse to let her move the goalposts. Second, employ logic. Identify the non sequitur of her outburst. Expose the lack of causality between the dirty sock and the apocalypse she is describing. Finally, utilize rhetoric. Your greatest weapon is silence. Frame control is established not by shouting louder, but by holding the silence like a stoic statue. Let her absurdity hang in the air, unsupported by your validation. By dissecting the tantrum without engaging in the feelings, you dismantle the emotional weapon and reclaim the transcendental order of your own mind. To think that a few decades of sociological scribblings can overrule the brutal logic of 100 millennia is to ignore the fatal pattern etched into the ruins of Rome. History teaches us with cold precision that civilizations do not fall to the barbarian sword until they have first rotted from within, a process that invariably begins when men surrender their edge to the comforting lie of androgyny. We are reenacting the tragic finale of Babylon, trading the muscular polarity of nature for a genderless ambiguity that saps the vitality of the state and leaves it vulnerable to the vultures of history. This is not a social evolution. It is a predictable cycle of decay where the erasure of sexual dimorphism serves only to ease the passage of a culture into the grave. The androgynous abomination, Marxism's war on the human form. Consider the sheer, unadulterated audacity of the modern sociologist who, with a sneer of condescension and the wave of a pen, attempts to erase 100,000 years of evolutionary programming. For eons, the human form was carved by the merciless chisel of natural selection, distinct and dimorphic, forged for the specific rigors of survival, hunting, and nurturing. Suddenly, we are told to believe that a few decades of academic theory and corporate training can somehow magically rewire the very essence of our biology. This gender blob, the amorphous, sexless creature of leftist imagination, is not a breakthrough in human awareness. It is a biological denialism so profound it borders on mass delusion. We are expected to ignore the broad shoulders of the hunter and the wide hips of the life-bearer, pretending instead that we are merely blank slates upon which a Marxist academic can scribble their delusions of equity. Let us apply the trivium, specifically the tool of logic, to this absurdity and watch the structure collapse under its own weight. The critical theorists posit that gender is merely a social construct, a performance we put on like a costume. If this were true, it would be subject to the whims of culture alone, yet we find gender etched into our very bones, quite literally. The forensic biologist can identify a skeleton as male or female from the shape of the pelvis or the mandible without knowing a single thing about the deceased's societal performance. Furthermore, the endocrine system does not run on sociology. It runs on testosterone and estrogen, powerful chemical drivers that shape our neurology and our instincts. To claim that the physical reality of the body is subordinate to the linguistic gymnastics of a gender theorist is to commit the fallacy of the stolen concept. For one cannot have a social construct without a biological entity to construct it upon. History screams a warning that we are foolish to ignore. We look back at the twilight of Rome and the final days of Babylon, civilizations that once towered like giants, only to crumble into dust. In their final decadent stages, a distinct pattern emerges, a confusion of sexual roles and the celebration of effeminacy among men. It is a symptom of the parasite, the cultural virus that weakens the host before the final kill. We are not merely observing a fashion trend or a momentary lapse in sanity. We are witnessing the final stage of the cycle. The West is currently undergoing this spiritual castration, mistaking the embrace of the androgynous for progress, when in reality it is the precursor to the grave. This is not an accident. It is a calculated conspiracy to create the weak man. The Marxist engine does not want a population of distinct, driven, and combative men and nurturing, grounded women. It wants a herd of interchangeable, androgynous worker units. By blurring the lines between the sexes, the system removes the sharp edges of masculinity that might challenge tyranny and dilutes the fierce protective instincts of femininity. The result is a beige monoculture of the soul, a consumer unit that is easily herded, easily managed, and easily pacified with bread and circuses. They seek to destroy the family unit because the family is the only competing power structure that rivals the state, and they do this by erasing the polarity that makes the family possible. There is a profound ugliness in this post-genderist delusion, an offense against the transcendental of the beautiful. Beauty, in its highest form, relies on tension and polarity, the contrast between the jagged, hard lines of a mountain and the soft, flowing curves of a river valley. Masculinity and femininity are the magnetic poles of the human experience, charged with a divine electricity that propels life forward. The androgynous ideal is a repudiation of this beauty. It is a gray, flat landscape where no shadow falls to give depth. It is the aesthetic of the Nutrient Necropolis, a sterile, formless blob that represents the death of culture itself. It strips the mystery and the allure of the sexes, replacing it with the clinical, lifeless sameness. We must recognize this war for what it is, an anti-nature, anti-life ideology designed to sterilize the West and leave it ripe for conquest. The major premise is undeniable. Nature thrives on sexual dimorphism, the specialization of the sexes for distinct yet complementary purposes. The minor premise is equally visible. Cultural Marxism seeks to erase all distinctions, to erase individuality, merit, and the biological roots of identity. The conclusion, therefore, is inescapable. The push for the androgynous abomination is a push to destroy the very foundation of human thriving. We reject the gender blob not out of hatred, but out of a love for life, for truth, and for the enduring spirit of a civilization that was built on the shoulders of heroes, not the backs of beige, sexless drones. We take the red pill not to retreat, but to stand firm in the reality of our own nature, armed with the logic of the ancients and the will to survive. We must shatter the insidious modern lie that confidence is a cognitive trick, a mental mantra whispered to a trembling spirit to soothe his anxieties. No, the virtus required to survive this necropolis is etched into the very sinews and skeleton, a biological reality that screams louder than any Marxist theory. I have witnessed the transformation with my own eyes, the moment a man ceases to shuffle apologetically and instead commands the space around him. The world is forced to reorder itself in his presence, women instinctively orbiting and men instinctively deferring. To understand this mechanics of power, we must turn our gaze to the alpha gate, the specific biomechanics of dominance that separate the architects from the nutrients. The Jeet of the sovereign, reclaiming the masculine spirit. The good, the true, and the beautiful are not abstract concepts floating in the ether. They are embodied realities. And they are currently dying in the gutter of the Nutrient Necropolis, because men have forgotten how to occupy space. The restoration of Western civilization begins with the restoration of the masculine stride, a physical rejection of the androgynous lie that seeks to collapse the distinction between the strong and the weak. When a man moves through the world with the unapologetic certainty of his own value, he is not merely walking, he is enacting a living argument for the transcendental order. He becomes a walking pillar of the old ways, a biological rejection of the Marxist egalitarianism that demands every man be hunched and broken to suit the fragile egos of the collective. By correcting his posture, the sovereign restores the beautiful to a culture starved of it, proving with every step that hierarchy is not a social construct, but a law of nature written in the very syntax of his spine. Consider the biomechanics of power, stripped of the academic jargon that obscures the raw truth of evolutionary biology. The alpha gate is not a performance of arrogance. It is the physiological manifestation of high testosterone and a refusal to submit to the dictates of a feminized matrix. When we observe a man who moves confidently, we are witnessing a subconscious broadcast of survival. He does not shuffle, he does not fidget, he does not glance downward in submission. These are the signals of the low status male, the supplicant begging for scraps from a table he built. In contrast, the man who occupies space, who strides with a shoulder-width certainty that declares he owns the ground he treads upon. triggers a primal recognition in both the male subconscious and the female instinct. This is the biology of dominance. A lanky, apologetic posture signals cortisol and fear, a meal waiting to be consumed, whereas a squared frame signals capability and danger. The body does not lie, and in a world of verbal deceit, the mechanics of the stride are the only language that cannot be gaslit. Your body is the text by which you are read, and if you slump, you are writing a tragedy with your own flesh. This is the trivium in motion. Your skeleton is the grammar of your existence. Your movement is the logic of your intent. The reaction you elicit from the world is the rhetoric of your status. A man with hunched shoulders is presenting a fallacy to the world, an argument that he is unworthy of respect, and the world, being a harsh but honest critic, accepts his premise and treats him accordingly. Conversely, a chest expanded by the breath of purpose, a chin locked in defiance, and a stride that eats up the distance, these constitute a persuasive argument of competence that demands assent. You cannot speak the language of the Western canon with the body language of a serf. To correct your posture is to correct your rhetoric, to turn yourself from a poorly written joke into a manifesto of power that compels the respect of your peers and the attraction of your adversaries. This physical reclamation is the only defense against being processed as a nutrient in this necropolis. The modern system is designed to grind you down, to extract your labor, your spirit, and your seed, feeding upon your vitality to sustain the grotesque machinery of the genocentric welfare state. If you walk as a victim, you highlight yourself as a target. But by carrying yourself with the weight of your ancestors with the gravitas of a Caesar or a Marcus Aurelius, you become indigestible to the system. You are no longer a nutrient to be farmed. You become the architect of a new reality. You signal that you are not a resource to be extracted, but a force to be reckoned with. The machine cannot chew on diamond. It breaks its teeth on the man who refuses to bend. By embodying the sovereignty of the past, you opt out of the future they have planned for you, rendering yourself immune to the predations of the cultural vultures circling overhead. Burn the self-help manuals that peddle the soft, cowardly lie that confidence is a mental game, a mere trick of visualization. Fake it till you make it is a doctrine for the deceitful and the weak, a placebo that fails the moment reality intrudes. Confidence is not a thought. It is a moral and physical imperative forged in the fires of Virtus, the Roman concept of manliness that is inextricably linked to martial strength and excellence. You cannot think your way out of a fear response that is hard-coded into your amygdala. You must overwrite it through the physical reality of competence and struggle. It is the sweat of the gym, the sting of the cold shower, the confrontation with the harsh elements, and the discipline of the daily grind that builds a confidence that does not waver. The mind follows the body. When the physical form is hardened and aligned with the truth of nature, the mind is forced to catch up, expelling the neuroses implanted by a leftist culture that despises the masculine form. I once witnessed a total transformation that illustrates the mechanics of this shift better than any statistical regression. A man I knew, let us call him Thomas, was a fixture of the background, a man who apologized for his existence with a nervous shuffle and averted eyes. He was invisible to the women he desired and disrespected by the men he worked alongside. After a brutal brush with the family court system, a system designed explicitly to dismantle men like him, he realized that his politeness was his death warrant. He stopped apologizing. He physically pulled his shoulders back. He walked down the center of the hallway, and he met every gaze without flinching. The result was not a subtle change. It was a flipping of the cosmic switch. Women who had looked through him for years began to orbit him, drawn by the sudden, inexplicable gravity of a man who refused to shrink. Men who had dismissed him began to defer to him instinctively, stepping aside to let him pass. Thomas had not changed his bank account or his face. He had simply corrected the error in his physical argument, and the world, against its Marxist programming, bowed to the truth. This is the final stand in the war for the soul of the West. We cannot reclaim the glories of our history, the logic of Athens, the might of Rome, the philosophical heights of the Enlightenment, if we do so with the bent spines of defeated serfs. To reclaim the masculine spirit is to reclaim the capacity for violence, yes, but also the capacity for order, structure, and creation. By walking as a sovereign, you reject the entropic decay of the woke nightmare and re-establish the beautiful where it was lost. You become the proof of concept that the machine is wrong. You are the living refutation of the critical theory that denies your nature. Straighten your back, uncoil your spine, and stride forward, for in your gait lies the salvation of everything we have built and the promise of everything we might build again. You have walked through the graveyard of the modern male psyche and stared directly into the hollow eyes of the Nutrient Necropolis, and you did not blink. We have dissected the flat tire gambit, not as a simple annoyance, but as the biological equivalent of a cuckoo bird pushing the host out of the nest. You now see the safety narrative for what it is, a velvet rope keeping the betas in line while the alphas walk through the front door. And you realize your wallet is not a sign of virtue, but a test of your susceptibility to the oldest con in history. The fog is gone. You see the syllogism clearly. If the system is built on the extraction of your essence without reciprocity, then participation in that system is not chivalry, it is suicide. Now you must carry this logic in your very stride, understanding that the body is the first argument a man makes to the world before he ever opens his mouth. When you stop apologizing for your existence and square your shoulders against the androgynous gray tide of Marxism, you are not just standing tall, you are engaging in a biological rebellion. You have learned that attempting to reason with the emotional volatility of a partner is like trying to teach calculus to a feral cat, a waste of your intellectual heritage and a recipe for frustration. Instead, you become the stone, the unmoving object against which the waves of hysteria break harmlessly, leaving you dry, intact, and undeniably sovereign. Go forth now as the architect of your own reality, wielding the trivium like a hammer against the fragile glass of leftist delusions. Do not hide this light. Share it, for the truth is the only contagion that can inoculate the West against the spiritual disease of our time. You are no longer a nutrient to be farmed. You are the living spirit of a civilization that refuses to die, armed with the irrefutable facts of nature and the unyielding steel of logic. The world will try to drag you back into the pit, but you now know the way out, and you possess the map to save your own soul, and perhaps, along the way, the sanity of a culture gone mad. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Nutrient Necropolis. Men are under attack, not by invaders or ideologies, but by the very foods we're told to eat. I learned this the hard way. At 35, I was a shell, brain fogged, muscles deflating, testosterone lower than my teenage daughter's. Doctors shoved statins and soy smoothies down my throat, while my vitality drained. That's when I tore up the rule book and went digging. What I found will enrage you. A century of lies sold by suits in boardrooms and white coats who want men docile, sick, and dependent. This book isn't for the faint-hearted. If you're content nibbling kale, gulping protein sludge, and watching your manhood circle the drain, close these pages now. Go knit a sweater. But if you're ready to reclaim the eating strategies that built empires, sharpened minds, and forged warriors, pay attention. We'll dissect the protein racket, how gym bros guzzling 200 grams daily are just funding Big Food's yacht parties. You'll discover why Roman legions dominated continents on one meal a day, how seed oils hijacked your kitchen to cripple your heart, and why that healthy vegan diet is chemically castrating you. I've packed this with battlefield-tested tactics, carb cycles that sharpen focus better than any nootropic, animal fats that reverse decades of cellular damage, and feast-famine patterns that spike growth hormone 1,300%. Science backs every claim. University of Texas data proves excess protein nukes your liver. The Nurses' Health Study shows seed oils hike death rates by 62%. And if you think hydration means chugging water till you're pissing hourly, wait till you hear how medieval men drank beer to outlive the hydrated. This is a manual for patriarchs, not participants. It's for men who want to lead families, outthink rivals, and die old with grip strength that cracks walnuts. The weak will call it extreme. Let them. While they're choking down tofu and statins, you'll be feasting on steak, leveraging ancestral wisdom, and laughing as your T levels hit quadruple digits. Your next meal is either poison or power. Choose wisely. The Nutrient Necropolis, written by Conrad, Riker. Buy now, links in description.